you will get someone going, we got that medicine to a child, we got that medicine to a patient. Only last June, we had one of our clients send us a link from BBC where we had helped launch a product in the UK. A 19-year-old had received the medicine and she had been receiving it, but it was now available, reimbursed on the marketplace. And her mother and her grandmother had died of this disease. And she was not going to die of this disease because of the medicine. And the GM said, your company did this work. And that was a huge boost for us. And, trying remembering those stories and bringing them forward, you actually can kind of go, okay, what's important here? It's important that the medicine is safe and effective to use for the patient.
Great. So, Evelyn Kelly, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here, Conor. Thank you for having me.
Not at all. So, could we start with orphan drugs? I do want to talk about Orphan Drug Consulting, but what are orphan drugs and why are they important?
Yeah, no problem. Orphan drugs treat rare diseases. There's over 7,000 rare diseases in the world and less than 10% of them have a treatment. Pre-1983, there was 38 treatments for rare diseases. And in 1983, Ronald Reagan, who was then the President of the United States, brought in the Orphan Drug Act, so called because these medicinal products or these treatments for rare diseases were traditionally orphanized or abandoned because there was no market for them because of the such low patient numbers in the world or even in the US. And that Orphan Drug Act in 1983 gave extended patents, it gave R&D tax credits, and there was also an understanding that these drugs are, which is eroding a little bit now, but less so than other areas, I have to say, that they have to be high value and they're low volume as well. So as a result of that act, the EU and Japan followed suit with similar legislation in 1993 and 2000, and today there's over 700 treatments for rare diseases in the world, and they're called orphan drugs. And there's very specific programs. You get what's called orphan drug designation in these markets, and there's other programs in other markets, but they're the three predominant ones. And that confers these special benefits on these products, which enable it to be a viable market really for the pharmaceutical industry.
So before, it basically didn't make any financial sense to try and treat such a rare disease, even though it was, potentially horrific for the person that has that disease. It didn't make any financial sense.
Absolutely. All these diseases are horrific. There's a high proportion of them that are pediatric in nature. There's a lot of them that are cancer-based, oncology-based, a lot of genetic prevalences of them as well. So they're the diseases that you hear about, on the media, that there's somebody that, there's a child that has this disease and the parents are fundraising for this one treatment, or, that there's a new treatment, but it costs an absolute fortune. That's essentially what orphan drugs are, and there's different kind of types of them from a medicinal product classification, we have the new kind of cell and gene therapy ones coming out as well, which are moving towards curative treatments. But that's essentially what you have to get is there's very clear criteria, and the criteria around getting what's called orphan drug designation is you get that before you even register the drug. So when you have your chemical entity or you look for orphan drug designation, and there's a certain criteria around how many people suffering in the population, that there's no alternative treatment on the market, or if the treatment you're bringing out will show a benefit to one that's already on the market. So there could be one or two, but no more than that. So there's very clear criteria to get orphan drug designation. That then confers the benefits that you get to register your drug. So what you do is you submit what's called an NDA or a BLA, a new drug application, or a biological drug application in the US, or a market authorization application in the EU. I'll just talk about those markets because and there's other names and different ones in other markets as well, but we won't get into that. And then you go from there. But you obviously have to go through clinical trials as well. You have to go through all the criteria, but it is accelerated. You get, as I said, accelerated approval timelines. There's an understanding that the clinical trial patient levels will not be the same. So I've seen clinical trials come through with data with 20, 30 patients. Obviously, there's different phases of clinical trials you need to ramp up. But in these disease states, the patients are not there a lot of the time. So you might have to go to 10, 12 countries to get 30, 40 patients, depending on the disease that you're looking at as well.
What do you know? is there a classification of, as many people in 100,000 say that might be affected by a certain disease? Like what classifies it as a kind of a rare disease?
So depending on whether you go to the EU or the US, it's a very clear defined population as well, So it's not that rare when you think about it like that. There's over 7,000 of them, and we're still diagnosing more and more rare diseases, and there's nuances of them then as well. So different kind of strains, different types of cancer come out, and there's, you've heard of these stories in the media where nobody knew where it was. A disease or person had symptoms and they were getting worse and nobody could diagnose it. And that's one of these ultra rare diseases as well. And as we document the symptoms and, centres of excellence come along, and, obviously we have a small population here in the Republic of Ireland. So, and we're very much, we look at that because the north of Ireland is UK based from a pharmaceutical and healthcare perspective. You're looking at the prevalence of it there, and you're looking in our population. We in Ireland would have it would be average to have 2-3 people in our population that would have a particular rare disease. So then what's called a centre of excellence, or a doctor who specialises, called a KOL, a key opinion leader. The rare disease that Ireland has is cystic fibrosis. That is Ireland's rare disease. We are the carrier. We are the spreader. We are the largest, the largest sufferer per population, per population on cystic fibrosis. So it's the one that people would know here. And if you think about cystic fibrosis, it doesn't feel like a rare disease here because we know lots of people that have it. But if you go to Germany or France, actually it's a similar patient population that we would have in Ireland. So like I've done a lot of work in cystic fibrosis over the years. And I lecture in Trinity as well in the School of Pharmacy. And it's actually, when I'm talking about rare diseases, the one I focus on to kind of as an example for the students, because it's really relevant and real to us. It's unbelievable what we've achieved in cystic fibrosis in the last 20, 30 years. Like the life expectancy has gone up 20, 30 years. I mean, I remember when I was younger, people just died, and when you're going into late teens, everybody just died of cystic fibrosis. That doesn't happen anymore. And there's different strains of cystic fibrosis, and people don't realise that, and there's more severe and less severe. But, it's perfectly normal now to live, a normal, relatively healthy lifestyle with cystic fibrosis with the new medicines that are out in the market.
Yeah, my dad's cousin, so my first cousin once removed, has cystic fibrosis and had a double lung transplant about 10, 15 years ago. But from my understanding, there is a kind of a miracle drug that came out a number of years ago that really helps people with cystic fibrosis.
Yes, there is.
Is that something that you deal with?
Yes. I worked with that company for 7 years.
Okay. So I get a sense of the kind of thing you're talking about now.
Exactly. And I think that's really relevant. Like, I mean, why are we such a prevalence of cystic fibrosis? And then actually it's all, what I love history, and I love looking at anthropology and that. And, even though I'm a pharmacist by training, and looking at all that, it's all connected, particularly when it comes to rare diseases. So how do we have such a prevalence of cystic fibrosis? Well, it comes from Cromwell's times. So it's to hell or to Connacht. So what happened was, obviously, Cromwell came and he cleared the indigenous population of Ireland to the west of Ireland, right? So that's when the disease started to really become prevalent. And we're an island nation, and we're a Catholic nation, and in the west of Ireland, actually, it says that there's 1 in 19 Irish people are carriers of the cystic fibrosis gene. And I don't know if you know, but two carriers have to have a child, and they have a 1 in 4 chance to have a child with cystic fibrosis. But in the west of Ireland, it's 1 in 10. So, and that comes directly from Cromwell. That is a higher prevalence of it in the west of Ireland. And then when the famine happened, and 25%, 30% of the population, so as we know, 2 million people died, 2 million people emigrated, a population of 8 million in Ireland. That's when the prevalence of it started in America. So you can see there, and actually the majority of the cystic fibrosis carriers and sufferers are of Irish origin globally. So it's not fascinating. I find it fascinating.
It is fascinating.
It's fascinating, But I mean, we would have a similar, of all the rare diseases I work in, And when you look at Ireland, Ireland's a key market for the companies that have the cystic fibrosis medicine. So much so that actually one of the companies I work with, they warehouse the product here, which is unusual. Like typically, for a rare disease product, such low volume, we would warehouse essentially. And then when an order comes in, you would deliver to Ireland in 1 to 2 working days, which is inviolable to do from a warehouse in the Netherlands or Germany. But actually they decentralized it here. And there was 5 or 6 key markets they picked. And in pharma, we have what's called the big 5. So the big 5 in Europe are Germany, France, Italy, Spain, and the UK now, even though the UK is no longer in the EU. And they're the kind of 5 key markets. And obviously they're the biggest markets and the most viable markets. But if I looked at that with cystic fibrosis, Ireland was incorporated to that as well. So that'll tell you the level of patients that are here.
Where does the business sit on the kind of from discovery and R&D all the way through to someone actually being treated by the drug? Where do you sit on that scale?
Yeah. So where we come in then is, so typically when a medicinal product is being developed, so a chemical entity or a molecule is discovered in the lab, and then that needs to get to what's called preclinical stage. So that's often done in universities or different people take that on board. And at that stage then, you need to get financing in place then to get it into clinical trial stage. And then as well as that, the other people that have to come on board then is the medical team. So making sure that you have the clinical aspects really key, understood, you understand what disease state you're going for, what parameters. And that's really important because you hear a lot of churn as well about certain products and certain disease states and saying, oh, my child's not eligible because they're 5. And, I was dealing with a product lately in Ireland and everyone's like, oh, the product's not available for children under 5. That's not fair. There's nothing about fairness, right? The clinical trial didn't incorporate children under 5. So therefore you can't give it to you can give it to it can be given to a child, but it's done what's called off label or off license because the product it hasn't been tested in children under 5. So the clinical trial parameters are really key. So you look at the population of patients and you have to do an inclusion criteria and exclusion criteria. So the medics do that. So as I said, you have the scientists, you have the financier, you have the medics, and we come in and we do the rest. Okay. So we do what's called the technical operations activities, and our focus is compliance and supply chain combined. So what does compliance mean to us? Compliance means compliance with quality assurance requirements, with regulatory requirements, with pharmacovigilance requirements. We are also quite focused on customs and VAT requirements, and that really kicks in. It's a big news at the moment, obviously, but that really kicks in even at clinical stage. Once you get into like a phase 2, when you go out of just one country, and sometimes before that, if your product's manufactured in a country, it needs to be imported in or exported out of different markets. And then we also look at the financial and the tax pieces. We're not tax advisors, but we work with the tax advisors to make sure that the technical requirement considerations are incorporated in. So an example there would be when a client is going for commercialization, they might go for a model where they're like, okay, Switzerland is the cheapest tax rate, and we want to put all our product in Switzerland. Put all our people in Switzerland. We're going to put all our, product is the wrong word. Put all our infrastructure in Switzerland because then we'll avail of the best tax rate. And then we're going, okay, but do you understand that this is a license you require? Do you understand that Switzerland's not in the EU? So you're going to have to look at licenses in other markets to supply directly to pharmacists and hospitals. So we make sure that they understand. Do you understand that post-Brexit, it's not as easy to do your customs and your VAT obligations out of Switzerland now? And that's and that's not information that people will have on hand, and it's not information that necessarily comes through when you're doing your tax activities, which is very focused on where is the best infrastructure to optimize your tax and financial status. So we incorporate that. We come in and we bring in that work as well. And then the supply chain piece as well. What do? We support our clients in, looking at their vendors. So a lot of our clients will do outsourcing of their activities. They'll outsource their manufacturing. They'll outsource their packaging. They'll outsource their distribution. They'll outsource their transport. There's requirements and obligations to do that outsourcing activity. So we support them in that. We had them select the vendors. We would have excellent relationships with the majority of the vendors. So, we would be doing what's called RFPs, requests for pricing, and we'll really know who's going to go with who before it goes through. But obviously you go through it and make sure that It's fit for purpose and everything. Another thing we do is we acquire licenses on behalf of our clients as well. So we're able to acquire licenses in multiple jurisdictions. So there's licensing required, and you could outsource some of it, but others you have to bring in-house. And particularly if you're going to take financial ownership for the goods, which you have to do if you want to avail of and to make sure that you want to buy and sell your medicinal product. So you need licenses in different markets. So we would acquire a lot of licenses as well for them. Transport validation is where you have to make sure that your transport doesn't affect the product. So you have to demonstrate before you do kind of mass transportation of product, that the product will not be affected by the method you select and the box or the shipper that you put the product in. So you validate that. So there's different activities we do. I could go on and on, but we do lots of different activities like that.
You're a pharmacist, right? And your background. And when I think of a pharmacist, I think of someone who's kind of creating drugs, right? But obviously it's a lot more broad than that. And your particular area of pharmacy has been really in this kind of logistics, supply chain side of things, right? So when you're talking about the things that you help people with, it's actually not really to do with the drugs themselves. It's really to do with the supply and how to kind of get it out to the market.
Yeah, but you have to, absolutely. And I'm a little bit unusual, So in Europe, actually, pharmacists are very prevalent in the industry. In Ireland, not so much. It's fantastic. Like that's one of the reasons I lecture in the School of Pharmacy in Trinity. The head of school there was very keen that the students saw that there's alternative pathways and alternative aspects to your careers. So it's been really fantastic. I'm doing that for a number of years now, and so. It's a fantastic background and a fantastic skill to have when you're dealing with what I do for a living. So yes, traditionally pharmacists would go more into the drug safety aspects or, the regulatory aspects and even the quality assurance aspects. So I'm a little bit unusual that I'm downstream, but you come to a stage in your career where you get more generalized, and your background doesn't really matter. And what your initial degree was, kind of not fades, but is not as significant as it was because your experience takes over. However, I would say that my pharmacy degree is used every day. I'm dredging up stuff that I would have learned in when I was 18, 19, because, when you're thinking through things, I always say, okay, well, how does it affect the product? And because you have that knowledge of how products are made and how products are manufactured, you can always go back to that. And it's been very useful, particularly in areas that I wouldn't have the experience in. People would say, well, how do you know that? Or, how are you clear on that? And I'm like, well, I'm a pharmacist. So that has helped enormously as well in my career as well. And it probably accelerated my career, particularly in the early stages as well.
I saw in my preparation for this that you started this business at your kitchen table.
Yeah.
And I'm just interested to hear, if you're comfortable, could you share kind of what kind of scale the business is at now, maybe turnover, a number of employees, that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, so absolutely. So I started it myself in 2017 and there was no plan. And people laugh and go, what do you mean there was no plan? But there was literally no plan, except I just thought that there was something I could offer to the industry, that combination of quality assurance and supply chain with the extra knowledge that I would have would be useful as a consultancy, because there was nobody that was offering that under a consultancy umbrella. And I said, okay, there's something here that I can do. And at the 6-month mark, it just exploded. I think people didn't believe, and I get it, because I see a lot of consultants around now, particularly at the moment when things are difficult in the industry at the moment. There's a lot of consultants around. So at the 6-month mark, things just, business started to come in. And as well, a lot of colleagues and friends said to me, look, do you have any work? We'll look at this. We see you're enjoying it. Could we come on board as well? And we really went like that for a number of years. Now, things have changed a lot since then. This is year 9 in business. So you do end up, then you have a kind of a nostalgia for the halcyon days in your own head, as well. But like, things have changed a lot now. We're very structured now. We are currently at about 15, and we would normally have a higher amount as usually, but it was a tough year last year, and we had some people retire and some people decided to move on, and so we're currently in the process of replacing them. We have about 15 to 20 long-term consultants. So what does that mean? It means we've worked with them for many years. I'm very careful who I take on board across 9 different markets as well. So we we have 4 offices headquartered here in Dublin. We have offices and office locations in Boston, London and Melbourne. I'd love one in Switzerland, and I'm talking about it long enough, so it needs to happen as well in the next while as well, because we do a lot of work in Switzerland. And we've helped over 70 companies to date, launching products in over 100 countries globally.
You said on your video for the EY Entrepreneur of the Year in 2022 that you went in the first year from about 250,000 to 5 million turnover or something like that. What was that like? And was it as simple as you just started charging more? There were a few more clients, you could kind of charge out your own time at a higher rate, or was it scramble, try find the right people for it? Did it feel kind of because it's a huge bump, right, in a short amount of time, in a 4 or 5 year period? Was it as difficult as it kind of sounds like it would be in my head?
Yeah, I suppose I was a bit naive. I didn't find it hard. And if the team hear me say that, they'll be like, really? Because we found it hard listening to you. So, maybe I should get you to delete that far corner. I'm joking. It just really, it grew quite gradually. So obviously 250, wasn't, that was just me. And then when you had other people on board, by the end of year 1, I had 3 or 4, and then, it just went from there. And then what happens is you start putting in processes, and you start putting in structures around that, because it's not, and any business owner will tell you that you don't scale, like you don't just increase the people with the revenue like that. Not in my business anyway. You have to really look at your processes and your structure and make sure that, there's a repeatability to what you do. So then actually that's probably the harder part, is making sure that you ensure that your processes capture the good parts, and that's consistent and repeatable, and having that part then, and then you can scale. When you scale up with people, then you can be, I'm very mindful about who I bring into the business, and very careful about who comes on board. But the processes now have really helped reduce any inconsistency or any lack of repeatability of what we do. And that's one of the cornerstones of what we do. So when you ask about scaling up, I think if you look at it year on year and you go, God, you went from 250 to 5 million in 4 years, and that was crazy. Yes, but it doesn't work like that. Okay, you look at it from month to month or quarter to quarter, and it's not that different, right? So if you're looking at going from 6 million to 7 million in a year, that's not a lot extra every month. And when you break that down into what activities you have to deliver, in a month to achieve that, and what resource you need, like if you have the right processes, it's actually not that much of a lift. So that's the way I look at it, and that's how I work, and it's made it very doable when you do it that way, and it's when things kind of fluctuate is the hard part as well, actually. So obviously you get downward fluctuations as well, different months. And I know the trends in the year now, and recognizing that and trying to manage the team. It's a constant battle. It's a constant battle between business development and operations, having the right amount of people to meet the needs of the client at the right time. That's the constant juggling game for sure in consultancy.
You said there was no plan.
I wasn't, no.
But was there something in your mind in terms of a goal, I want to get to a certain amount, or, I wanted to look like this in 3 years' time? Like, was there anything, can you remember, in your mind at that stage?
I would have said I wanted to have a year's salary in the bank. That was my first goal. And then the second goal then was I wanted to have, a year's salary for everyone in the bank. And then you wanted to have maybe 3 years. And look, you're never going to have 3 years, because at that stage, it just makes no sense to keep that kind of cash in the business, So, I think at that stage then that those goals were, very, not naive, but very basic, I suppose. Is that the right word to use? I'm not quite sure.
Well, to me, and I hope you don't mind me saying so, they're more almost protecting the downside rather than shooting for the stars, right?
Well, I mean, what do? We manage risk for our clients. So obviously I manage risk in my team and manage risk with the company as well. I never saw it as managing for the downside. I just managed making sure like that we had stability and structure in the business, that we could take more risks actually and be able to try new things out, and to be able to do different, activities that would say, okay, we go to that conference, or yeah, we can do this with the team. When COVID was happening, we were very busy during COVID. We actually won a contract to support an Israeli company in expanding their infrastructure because they won the Moderna contract in Central and Eastern Europe. So we were very busy on that. And I said to the team the whole time along, when this is over, we'll go to Portugal. And we did go to Portugal, and we went for a few days, and it was fantastic and that. So, having kind of a little bit of flexibility to do things like that. And it was a kind of a running joke, but I was like, okay, now we're going to come good on the promise and the joke. That's where I view having those goals were allowed us to expand and grow as a team as well. Really.
Being in healthcare, and actually being in the specific part of healthcare that you're in, I was thinking there must be a real sense of purpose with what you're doing, because of the people that you're helping, ultimately. Did that come prior to starting the business, or has it kind of come as a result of being in the business?
It was well before that, like well before that. I always wanted to be in healthcare. And when I was a child, I looked at different areas, and I wanted to be a teacher, as well. And I kind of feel that I do both now, actually. Like I joke that, like, that's what we do in consulting, that we teach and kind of coach as well. But I always felt that I wanted to do something that delivered good in the world and had a purpose to deliver good in the world. And, sometimes you can get caught up in the revenue and EBITDA and resourcing and HR and, project plans and KPIs, etc. But actually, every so often, and it's quite frequent in my world, in my work, you will get someone going, we got that medicine to a child, we got that medicine to a patient. Only last June, we had one of our clients send us a link from BBC where we had helped launch a product in the UK. And it was for an illness, and a 19-year-old had received the medicine, and she had been receiving it, but it was now available, reimbursed on the marketplace. And her mother and her grandmother had died of this disease. And she was not going to die of this disease because of the medicine. And the GM said, your company did this work. And that was a huge boost for us. And, trying remembering those stories and bringing them forward, particularly in 25, which is an exceptionally challenging year for pharmaceuticals, are really important as well. And it does give you a sense of purpose. And it also gives you a sense of perspective as well as a sense of purpose, because when you're looking at clients and you're in the middle of launches, or you're in the middle of clinical trials and there's challenges and issues, you actually can kind of go, okay, what's important here? It's important that the medicine is safe and effective to use for the patient. And if you focus on that, you will never go wrong in your decisions, or how you guide the client in how to make their decisions.
Why did you go into pharmacy? Was it the sense of you felt like you could make an impact on the world in a positive way, or was it something more technical? Why did you end up in it?
Yeah, so I was very much on the fence about going into pharmacy myself. I think my mother, as my mother said, she never told me what to do, or how did she put it to me? She said she pretended she never told me what to do. So my mother is a nurse. She's a public health nurse before she retired. She retired a few years now, and I suppose my extended family as well. My family would have been very pro education. My grandmothers would have been very pro education as well. And I suppose I was influenced by we were, a lot of my cousins and that were going into different kind of healthcare spheres. So I looked at what I wanted to do. And I picked pharmacy. I'd worked in pharmacy. I had a concept that I'd own a shop, of course. Like, I think a lot of young teenagers that go into pharmacy think that's what they're going to do. And I liked that idea of being out in the community helping people. But also I liked the idea of pharmacy being, when I was going in to do my degree, I liked the fact that I would have a qualification at the end of it. So I was very interested in doing languages and arts. And I sometimes, people say to me, what would you do if you didn't do this? I'd love to go back and do an arts degree, actually. And I still, maybe someday. But I feel, and that's a fantastic base as well. But for me, I felt that I wanted to go to college and have a qualification at the end of it. And it was very much 4 years in college, and then you did a year training and you were a qualified pharmacist. And that appealed to me a lot as well. And so there was an element of the practicality and I suppose practicality background, and then this idea that I wanted to do good in the world as well. Yeah.
Is that something that you look for when you said earlier that you're very careful about who you work with and who you kind of take on as a consultant? What are you looking for there really, and what's your filter for looking at people to work
Yeah,
with?
and I don't always get it right. I think anyone that sits in this chair will tell you that, and definitely I've made mistakes over the years. But actually, what I'm looking for is an attitude. Very much looking for a can-do attitude, someone who's interested, that's motivated. Obviously, background is important, but it's not essential. You can learn a lot of the skills, and we have taken on people and taught them the skills as well. They start in a junior role and they work their way up. But really, and problem-solving ability is really key as well. And I see now that I think COVID has really affected that. And the world is a little linear at the moment in the last couple of years. And I've spoken about this openly. And we do a client workshop every year in Switzerland. So we had 50 people at it last year. And one of my presentations was how I've seen, people interact and how the behavior and the changes I've seen the last few years and the concerns I have over them. People come to me and say, I want you to do a gap assessment in our quality system, and I want you to do it for Ireland or for the UK. And I'm like, but do you know, are you actually going to locate in those markets? What's your activities you're going to do? Because I don't know if you need a license or not. And there's no point in you spending the money with me unless I'm sure you're actually going to use this information. And if that was 3-4 years ago, someone would say, okay, that makes sense. Let's go one step up and look at that. Whereas now people go, don't care, just want to do it. So I don't want people in my business that just go, don't care, just want to get it done. That doesn't work for us. It doesn't work for our clients. So having that kind of, open mind to think about, the different areas that you might bring people towards to say, well, does this make more sense actually, is key as well.
Is it an integrity type of thing when you're dealing with clients rather than just trying to sell them something that they're asking for rather than what you think they need?
It isn't. Of course, it's an integrity thing, but also it's a brand thing. It's a brand and a marketing thing. You can make a lot of money quickly, but you won't last long. So if I sell you something that you think you need right now, and it doesn't work for you, and then 6 months down the line, 90% of our business is word of mouth. I think I said that already, but just to bear that in mind, probably a little bit higher actually. You're going to turn around and say, well, actually, they did that work for me. We spent, 60, 70 grand with them, and it was useless. And that's what happens, and nobody cares about the story. All they care about is the headline. So I've actually no point in sitting there talking to the next client that says, well, you went into ABC company and you did this work, and they said that it wasn't value add. I can't sit there and go, but they told me they didn't want to look at this and this, that, and the other. And believe me, I've been there trying to justify myself. It doesn't work. So that's what I tell my team as well. We need to be mindful about what we take on. And the key to that really, and I've learned this more and more over the years, is making sure, so you have an initial scope of work, but then you transfer that to a project plan, and then you track to the project plan, and you make sure you say to the client, now you've said you don't want us to do this. And, but we've replaced this with that. Is that okay with you? And to try and keep that in their mind all the time. And it's not always successful that would work as well. But it's a brand thing as much as an integrity. I don't like doing work that I know is not value add. It doesn't sit well with me. And it's something that it's been said to me, you need to, not always drive your opinion so strongly on the clients. And I hear that. But I mean, I've been there and done that, and I want to make sure that they get value. So it's always from a good place that I try and do that. But also it's making sure that it doesn't affect our business as a whole is key as well.
You come across very confident, right? You know exactly what you're talking about. Well, certainly it seems like to me, right? And I'm wondering, you've done quite a bit of management, almost education and things like that. And I'm wondering what you kind of learned from that and what you maybe took away from it, because And maybe it's just post doing this stuff that you come across this way, and you're so assured in these parts of the business that we're talking about. But was it always that way?
Oh, I can tell you, like, I started my career in the industry in United Drug. And, my colleagues in United Drug will definitely tell you that wasn't the case. And I'm still very friendly with them. A couple of old colleagues work with me now in the business, actually, both on the board and in the business. And they'll tell you that very much wasn't the case. But I remember, like, when I started working in the industry, I'd worked in community and hospital pharmacy for a few years, and it was just a completely different way of working. I couldn't get my head around it, and I had my first boss, and still close to him, Mick Dunn, United Drug, was fantastic. And he used to knock on my door and say, Evelyn, you can go for a cup of coffee. It's important people see you. And I'm like, well, I've all this work to do and I want to make sure it's done. He's like, no, it's important to be visible in the office as well. I was quality manager, and he's like, you need to be, seen so people can have a chat to you. And that's important. I had no concept of any of that. Absolutely none. And then I got feedback that, I wasn't very good at it. And I said to Mick, well, okay, Mick, I'm no good at it, but I've never done this before. So give me some help. And he went, 100% I will. And actually he helped a guy called Fergus Barry. So Fergus was my first coach, and Fergus helped me out in a fantastic way. Fergus is amazing. And he really helped me as well. But I was very willing to learn. And then I remember, learning the skills, and I had so many people, too many names to mention, that helped me out and helped me kind of, when I was so green as well. And I learned a lot. Like, United Drug was just fantastic for me. And then I moved to Shire Pharmaceuticals, and I remember being in Shire and saying to a colleague of mine, so I noticed that people would always say, when I asked them a question, I'd say, well, what do you think? They'd say, that's a good question. And I was like, why do people always say that's a good question when you ask them a question? And my friend and colleague said, it's an MBA thing, Ev. He's like, you do that to buy yourself some time. And I was like, all right. And he was like, that's how everybody talks, and I was like, it's an MBA thing. And he's like, yeah, everyone does an MBA. And he said, and you learn the tools and the skills. So I was like, right. Nice. And when I was leaving United Drug, Liam Fitzgerald, the CEO, had advised me that if I could, that I should consider doing an MBA as well, actually. And I had that in my head also. So actually, over the course of a few years with the Irish Management Institute, I did business qualification, and I did it with 3 separate diplomas and an overarching to get what was called an MBS, which is very similar to an MBA. With my work, it was hard to commit to being somewhere Monday and Wednesday night or Friday and Saturday, because I did a lot of traveling for work, and that was entirely necessary as well to get my experience on the ground and get all the launch work that I've done. I mean, I've launched products all over the world, and the reason was because I was identified as someone that could solve problems really well. And I would be called up and said, this happened to me, can you be in Brazil? How soon can you be there? We have a problem with our launch. How soon can you be here? And that was a fantastic experience for me in my late 20s. And so I took it on board and did it early 30s. And, but, I had to have a course that could be flexible around that as well. So I did that with the Irish Management Institute, and that was fantastic, and I learned so much from that. And I think what I really liked about, I can't talk about other institutions, but in the IMI, you took your current business and you used that for your assignments, and that was really helpful as well. So that was just fantastic for me. And then the other thing that I've done, which has been hugely helpful, is Leadership for Growth with Enterprise Ireland. And I was asked that I want to do that in 2023. And that was a challenging year for Orphan Drug Consulting for a couple of different reasons. And I remember thinking to myself, I can't afford to do this right now, both time and resource. And then I thought to myself, I can't afford not to do it. So I did Leadership for Growth as well. And I was a bit concerned there would be crossover with the MBA and that as well, but there wasn't. And that was fantastic as well. So there's, it's been a combination of myself getting some education myself, and I didn't realize it until a friend of mine from school said to me, "But you love to learn, Evelyn." And I was like, "Do I? No, I don't." And she's like, "You do." And it's funny when someone from school says you always love learning, and then you're like, "Yeah, I actually do as well." So it's that combination of hearing other people and seeing your own gaps and doing something about it as well, and then that support from Enterprise Ireland with Leadership for Growth, and that came from the Entrepreneur of the Year network as well. Everyone's like, "You have to do this." And and that's another thing I did, was one of the best things I ever did as well. So that support from the Entrepreneur Network as well in Ireland and Enterprise Ireland has been great.
Leadership for Growth is in particular the thing I hear most as the kind of biggest help to people and what they've done. So just for someone who might be listening that doesn't know, it's a year-long course in leadership, and you do it's with a university abroad rather
That's
than
right.
here.
So it's Enterprise Ireland led, and they obviously, you apply to Enterprise Ireland. You have to be an Enterprise Ireland client, and they take about 30 companies that they consider high value, high growth. There's certain criteria around that. I won't go into that now. And you apply, and every 5 years they pick a new university abroad. So the IESE in Barcelona has got the tender again for the next number of years, and we did it with the IESE as well. And it was a year-long program. It's about 30 of us on the program, and you spent a week in Barcelona, a week in Munich, and a week in New York. And on top of that as well, you spent a significant amount of time here in Ireland with your group as well. So people have asked me about leadership growth. I would say it's 50 working days commitment in the year, which is 10 weeks. It's significant, and that's like considering, because you hear like 3 weeks away and you're like, that's manageable, but it's not 3 weeks away. You have days here, you have what's called a cohort. So there's 4 or 5 in a smaller group, and you spend a lot of time in your cohort as well. You have prep work, you have reading, you have project work to do, but it's all in your own business, and I would say I spent the first 3 months of Leadership for Growth going in denial. The second 3 months going, oh my God, and the third 3 months going, right, this has to be changed. These things have to be fixed, and that was a lot of things have come out of that with the business as well. But it's challenging to hear. I think when you're at my stage, I say to people, I wish I'd done it a bit earlier, but then would you have been able to really benefit from it earlier? It's hard to know as
Without
well.
having the kind of
Yeah,
specific
but that's
problems.
Leadership for Growth. It's just fantastic. Yeah.
What was the biggest thing you took from that you implemented in your own business?
I put a board in place. That was one of the biggest things I did. I changed out my approach to operations. I changed a lot of people. We're still going through that as well. I recognized that that things had crept into the culture that I wasn't happy about. So, I mean, I could go on like there's other things that you see about your marketing and different aspects as well. But there are some of the key things that I took out about the business, and you can really see clearly then, where like there's kind of 10 key areas that you look at, and there's different themes and different weeks on that as well. And you can see very much where the standard is, or it's not even necessarily a standard, where best practice is, and you measure yourself against it. And you walk into these sessions, yeah, my HR is fine, or my finance is fine, or this is fine, and then you come out and you're like, actually, these are the things that I could improve. And like, bear in mind that everybody in that course are successful businesses, like successful, viable businesses that are turning over and making good money. So it's not that anyone there is there because, things aren't working. It's there to improve and drive forward continuous improvement so you can consolidate and accelerate your business. Yeah.
When you were talking about that performance review, I was reminded of my first performance review, and I got some feedback that I thought was very difficult for me, but my reaction was totally different to yours. I personalized that, whereas you said, well,
oh no, I do personalize it. Definitely.
Well, I
can tell you that, yeah.
Well, I don't know, because I'm wondering, you seem like someone who, as you said, you love learning, that you said you might not have thought that about yourself before, but you do love learning, and you take on feedback. And I know from speaking to other people at Leadership for Growth that there's a little bit of a mirror shone on you as a person and as a leader and things like that. I suppose, do you know what it is that helps you kind of absorb this stuff and not be like, I might be a little bit, what's the word? I might not like hearing that stuff. And I might not like it so much that it may go in one ear and out the other.
Nobody likes hearing this stuff, so if it comes across that I liked hearing it, you will have a lot of friends, family, colleagues, employees that will tell you that Evelyn Kelly does not like to hear negative things. But if you don't hear the negative things and don't ask people for that, how are you going to learn and change? And you have to it's hard, and you have to take them on board. And, but it comes a point in life, and it's not just in work, it's personally as well, that you sit down and you realize, well, there's only one common denominator, and it's me. So, and the one thing in this life you can fix, or not fix, wrong, that's the wrong word, change, is you. And you can't change anything about this world except your response to it. And if you learn that and understand that, it makes life a lot easier. And I can tell you, it's not something I live every day. I'm the first one to complain about the unfairness of X, Y, and Z. Say this service has gone downhill, or this is crazy, or whatever. But you have to take a step back and say, okay, well, I can't change that. This has changed. I can't change that this isn't as good as it used to be. I can't change that this person doesn't want to engage the way they did once, but I can change how I approach it or how I react to it.
Was there a point in time that you learned that?
Yeah, I suppose in the last 4 or 5 years, for sure. It's a constant learning, I think. That's what I would say. It's constant learning of that, and constant reminder of to yourself, and, doing work to make sure you remind yourself of that every day. And when you get annoyed and frustrated about things, and believe me, I do, bringing it back to kind of going, well, what are you actually annoyed about? Because, things go wrong. Things don't work out. That's life. But then, does it do any good to react negatively to it? It doesn't. And believe me, I do react negatively to things. But, each time you do, you learn it's pointless, because it doesn't get you anywhere. All it does is, as somebody told me a couple of weeks ago, they said to me, well, what you said was right, but the message was lost in how you delivered it. And that was really good feedback, because, like, it's so true. It's so true. You lose impact on your message if you deliver it in a negative manner.
Did you always want to have your own business? You said that you always kind of wanted to make an impact, and healthcare was something that you thought you could make an impact within healthcare. Did you always want to do it for yourself rather than within?
I did. And, when I've been asked that a couple of times before, and I was like, did I? And yeah, I thought I'd own a shop. I thought I'd become a pharmacist and own a shop. My dad is a small plant hire business at home. I grew up like that, was used to that as well at home. And yeah, I did. I always thought I'd end up, I'm not very good at being told what to do. So working for myself, I think, and you'll probably hear this from a lot of people in this seat, a lot of entrepreneurs. A friend of mine used to say he was unemployable, and so am I think. So when you're unemployable, you have to employ yourself, for sure.
Is that do you think the two things go hand in hand? Do you think sort of unemployability, and I don't know how you would describe it, because when you were saying, it sounded to me, and I've only had that one snapshot of you in that very first feedback session, but it sounded like you were dealing with that quite well, and that you actually could have been quite a good employee, and you had quite a few years working in industry. But either way, do you think the two go hand in hand, this kind of not being able to be an employee and being...
And just to clarify, I was employed for a lot of my life, and I did very well, and, got on very well with people, and didn't particularly enjoy politics sometimes, but you can't avoid politics in life. That's what I've learned as well over the years. And that's just not in work. That's, everywhere. Like, it's personal as well. But yeah, I think it's part of the drive for everybody that becomes their own boss, that they just don't want to work for someone else, and they feel like, for me, I felt I had something I could offer. I felt I could have a better control of my work-life balance. Even though it's not always correct, I feel I do. And I felt that it was something I wanted to try out as well. And, things like people say, oh, you're not concerned about the risk. And what I would say to that was, but I managed my own risk, and I created my own stability. And, I've worked in an industry where companies are bought and acquired. And, I left Shire Pharmaceuticals to join MPS Pharma. 6 months later, Shire bought MPS, went into PTC Therapeutics. And, it was great, but you learned to be very adaptable and manage change, and kind of realize that, and Shire bought and acquired a lot of companies before it was acquired itself by Takeda. You learn to really become good with change. And if you're good with change and you're used to that, and you create your own stability, that's a really key to becoming self-employed, I think, as well.
What's the most difficult thing that you find about doing it, that you might not have thought too much about, or you might not have thought it would be a big issue for you before going into it?
Hmm. The one thing that comes to mind is being responsible for other people's livelihoods. And I don't take that lightly. It's not the most difficult thing for sure. I really, I don't take that lightly, and I take that as a big responsibility. And making sure that people are happy and engaged, is important to me, and making sure that they have secure tenures is important to me as well. And that's a big responsibility. And I think anybody that you're talking to will say that. The one thing I didn't think would be as difficult, I suppose, to follow on from that, was all the internal activities. And it's no good to say you don't have any time for them. And you need to have them. And that's what I've learned in the last few years as well. As you grow your business, you need to have the right processes and procedures in place, from an IT perspective, a facilities perspective, a HR perspective, financial perspective, all those aspects. And just because they're not your forte doesn't mean they're not necessary. So understanding how you cover them as well is key.
Did you bring someone in to help you with that
Yeah,
stuff?
I have. I have a number of people that help me in that as well. And that's ever evolving. You have to evolve and change as a business, evolve and changes and scale up with what you need as well. But if you don't have those systems in, your business isn't functioning, and it's not protected correctly either.
What lights you up most about the business and what you do, right? Because I suppose we talked a little bit about stuff that you had to learn, and it's necessary and all that. What for you is the thing that really kind of drives you and lights you
I
up?
love going into a client and hearing that they have gaps and helping them understand those gaps, and fixing them. That's as simple as that. Be it they're coming in to do a phase 1 clinical trial and they don't understand how they go about that. Be it that and I really love commercializing product. I really love that. I really love when a client is coming to the EU particularly, and we help them set up the infrastructure, and we get their licenses set up, we get their entities set up, we pick their third party logistic provider, we get their transport set up, we get their packaging set up, we do their serialization, we do their artwork. I love coming in and doing a big project like that, and then seeing them get to launch and see them get to other markets, and even seeing them get acquired by a big pharma company, by big pharma. I love seeing that success, and I love being part of it. And I love, that's absolutely, I love that. Another aspect I love is managed access programs. So managed access programs is when the product is not available in a market, and there's nationalized programs that are available. So France is a very good program, for example, and there's nationalized programs available where patients that need the medicine before it's commercialized or launched in that market can get it. And I love helping a client navigate that to get the patient's medicines earlier than they should.
You said a little earlier, well, a couple of times, about the kind of challenges in this industry at the moment, and that it's very difficult. Can you talk a little bit about those, and what they are, and kind of how you're dealing with them?
Yeah, the investment market is not what it used to be. With the with the changes in the US as well, it's been very challenging, and it happened very quickly. So obviously, their election happened in November, and in November 24, and from there on in, things have become very unpredictable. And what happens when unpredictability enters into the world is people just don't do anything. Okay, so what we've found very much then is, there's been a lot of non-decisions. So the cycle, the typical business development cycle would be 6 months. That's gone to a year. That's challenging. And even at that, then you could be talking to a client for 6 months and they'll decide not to proceed, which would have been unheard of a few years back. We don't see. There's other aspects that have come in, like pre-administration change in the US as well. The reimbursement challenges in Europe. We have done such a good job on reimbursement. We're no longer viable as a market. Okay, so a lot of our customers would say to me now that they do the numbers, they're launching in the US, they'll do the numbers, and it's just not viable to launch in Europe because our reimbursement numbers are so low. And you hear people talk about, we got it for X price and Y price, and this is where that's what's called the My Favorite Nation discussions are happening. So the new administration have said they're not going to pay the high prices, and they're looking at countries in Europe to bring up their prices. Countries in Europe are refusing to bring up their prices, and we're at a stalemate. Okay, but there's a lot of truth in what this administration are saying on that. You know, the US can't keep paying these hugely inflated drug prices, and the EU and other markets can't keep driving them to the bottom either. So we're not getting access to medicine. So when I founded Orphan Drug Consulting, there was maybe 30 companies a year coming to Europe and setting up. That's down to 10 or 15. And that's, you do the maths, right? And I'm talking about in this small to medium biotech space. Like our clients are small to medium companies, like, you know, 200-300 employees looking to commercialize in other markets as well. And then everybody wants to do is out license or partner their product. We've pivoted a bit into supporting that now as well. But that's very challenging as well. Very challenging. Yeah.
Does it make it difficult for you, like when we were talking about goals earlier, does it make it more difficult for you to kind of decide where you want to be, say, in kind of a 3 to 5 year period, and to go towards that if there's so much uncertainty in the meantime?
Of course it does. Yeah, of course it does. You know, you would have had a plan for your business, and then this has thrown up a huge curveball, and you have to roll with it. But that's life. That's business. I mean, you know, that's like you have. I would challenge to say, if I have anyone sit here and not say that has happened, you know, I mean, and I've been very lucky. We've had a very smooth path up to now, and, you know, it's just the way of it, like, you know, and you just have to, as my dad says, take the rough with the smooth. Yeah.
So do you think more short term as a result? Are you kind of saying, well, let's see how it goes in the next 3 months?
Well, you have to do both. Like, you have to do both. No, I don't think I say let's see how it goes in the next 3 months. I mean,
it does sound a little bit casual.
Yeah. You know, I mean, you're fairly fixed for the next 3 months if I'm open, but, you know, you do start to focus very much. You know, you have to see what you're doing now, what impact that will have in a year's time. And that's key if you're looking at what are you doing now, because, you know, you have to view a business like a big ship. It takes a while to steer it, and some things are quick and some things are not so quick. So if you want to change things like a process, that can be quick. But if you want to change the way people think, that's slower. Or you want to change, you know, the branding or the perception of your company in the market, that's very slow, you know. And by very slow, you could be a year, 18 months, you know. If you want to build your network in different market, that's a year project. So you're thinking ahead now as to what is going to help grow your business and support your brand in a year's time, really, and what you do now to support that, while at the same time making sure that you're bringing the business to support the activities that you're doing in 2026. Yeah.
Do you see yourself in this business very much in the long term until you retire, or what do you kind of think about when you look far into the future?
Yeah. I see myself in pharmaceuticals, and I love Orphan Drug Consulting, and I'll stay working, you know, heading up Orphan Drug Consulting as long as it makes sense. I mean, I own it 100%. So as long as it makes sense for me to be head of it, that I'll stay, absolutely. I have no huge desire to do anything different. You know, you look at other things and you say, yeah, I like this area and I like that area, but that doesn't mean you can't do them as well, you know. You know, I love the pharmaceutical industry. I've never worked in anything else. So it's a good question. But
you might still go back and do your arts degree at some stage.
Maybe so. But that's maybe when I retire as well. But, you know, when do you retire? That's the $1 million question as well, you know. Yeah. I mean, for sure, working at a high pace as an entrepreneur, or be transparent, you have to be careful not to burn out, you know, and you have to be careful to take care of yourself and make sure you know when enough is enough. And I think that's really key as well on that as well.
Is there anything you do intentionally on that front?
I suppose very much trying to focus on physical health. And I think if you don't at this stage, you will never focus on physical health and keep getting the basics in as well, because it's easy not to sleep, easy not to do exercise, easy because there's a lot of demands in your time. So trying to focus on that. And again, that's a daily battle as well, you know. Yeah.
Evelyn Kelly, thank you very much for coming in. I've really enjoyed the conversation, and I've learned a huge amount about pharma. I still, you know, I don't even know enough to be dangerous, but it was really interesting for me. So thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me. It's been great. Thank you very much. Okay.
Cheers, Evelyn.
Bye, Connor.